I came home late Friday night, dragging my suitcase behind me after 3 endless days of business meetings in Chicago. The house was dark. Quiet, too quiet. I was reaching for a cold drink when I heard it, a faint metallic thump coming from the garage. Then again, louder. At first, I thought it was an animal. But the sound, those weak, desperate knocks, felt human. My heart pounded as I flipped on the garage light, and there he was. My grandpa, 80 years old, trembling, drenched in sweat, his lips cracked, eyes sunken. He tried to sit up, but his body gave out. I rushed to him, my knees hitting the concrete. "Grandpa, what happened? Who did this?" He swallowed, voice shaking like the rest of him. "Your father. He wanted to teach me a lesson." That was the moment everything inside me changed. The paramedics arrived in under 10 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. I stayed on the cold garage floor, holding Grandpa's trembling hand while they checked his pulse. His skin was burning hot, his breathing shallow. When they lifted him onto the stretcher, his eyes fluttered open, searching for me. "Stay with me, Grandpa, please," I whispered. His lips moved, barely forming words. "Don't. Blame yourself, Chloe." How could I not? The drive to Tampa General was a blur of flashing lights and my own shaking hands. By the time we reached the ER, my shirt was soaked with sweat and tears. The doctor's words hit like a hammer. Severe dehydration, heat exhaustion, early-stage kidney strain. 3 days without water. 3 days alone in the dark, with no one hearing his cries. I sat in the waiting room staring at the vending machine, numb. My mind replayed the sound of the metal thuds, the weak knocking I almost ignored. What if I'd come home a day later? What if I'd taken that extra meeting in Chicago? He'd be dead. When they finally let me see him, he looked fragile under the hospital lights. Tubes ran into his arms. A heart monitor beeped steadily beside him. His voice was a whisper. He didn't mean to. Not really. I leaned closer. "Grandpa, you said Dad did this." His eyes closed slowly. "He said I meddled, that I should have stayed out of his affairs." My stomach twisted. My dad, Gregory Shaw, wasn't some petty man off the street. He was a millionaire developer, a man people called visionary. But behind that perfect smile was something darker, something that terrified me as a kid. He controlled everything. Money, people, even emotions. And if Grandpa had stood up to him, I could imagine exactly how that conversation went. When the nurses asked me to leave so they could monitor his vitals, I stepped into the hallway and pressed my back against the wall. My phone buzzed, 3 missed calls from Dad. I stared at the screen, my reflection faintly visible on the black glass. For years I'd ignored the warnings, Mom's tears, Grandpa's quiet disapproval, the way my father's voice could slice a room in half. But not this time. This time he'd gone too far. And as I walked out of that hospital into the heavy Florida night, one thought repeated in my head. If he wanted to teach Grandpa a lesson, I'd make sure he never forgot mine. I didn't sleep that night. The hospital chairs are unforgiving, and the fluorescent lights carve worry into your skin. At dawn, I drove straight to my father's house, Bayshore Boulevard, manicured hedges, the kind of place that screams, perfect life. Gregory Shaw was already in the garden, pruning roses like nothing had happened. His hands moved with the precise, practiced care of a man who controls everything he touches. He glanced up, smiled that polite, practiced smile. "Chloe, you're home early. How did the conference go?" I didn't answer. The sight of him so calm, so composed felt obscene. "Where were you Thursday night?" I asked instead, the words shredding out of me. He blinked. "At home? Why?" "Bullshit." My voice cracked. "Grandpa was locked in my garage for 3 days. He's in the hospital." "He said you did it." For a moment, his face didn't move. Then he set the pruning shears down, wiped his hands on his trousers, and walked toward me with the slow ease of someone stepping into a role he'd rehearsed 1,000 times. "That's absurd," he said. "Your grandpa forgets things, age does that. Maybe he locked himself in by accident." His eyes were flat, searching for the angle that would make him innocent. "He told me you locked him in. He said you wanted to teach him a lesson." Saying the words out loud felt like tearing a bandage off, painful, necessary. Gregory's jaw tightened. He leaned in, lowering his voice until it was silk over steel. "Listen to me, Chloe. Your grandfather has been undermining me for years, bringing up old family business, sabotaging deals, writing letters to the board. I gave him chances. I am a reasonable man, but the company is my life. If he was jeopardizing everything I built, someone had to put limits. Instance of course in Story. You put him in a garage, I said. The words landed between us like a verdict. He smiled small, condescending. You don't understand how the world works. Tough decisions are part of leadership. Maybe he overstepped. Maybe I made him think twice. But I did it for the greater good. Greater good? I laughed without humor. You nearly killed him. He flinched just barely, then straightened. Don't be dramatic. He's fine. He'll be fine. His fingers tightened on a garden statue, as if to anchor himself. You should be careful, Chloe. People will say things when you're stressed. You should protect the family. There it was, the thinly veiled threat. Protect the family, protect his empire, protect his reputation. As if truth was something to be hidden behind hedges and money. Did you or did you not lock him in? I demanded. He looked at me like I'd asked a math problem he had no time to solve. If you're accusing me, bring proof. Otherwise, this is slander. Proof. He made it sound like I'd suggested making up stories. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. I will find it, I said. And when I do, you won't have a board to hide behind. He stepped back, the smile gone. For the first time in my life, I saw something raw and human in his eyes. Fear. Not of me, but of exposure. The kind of fear that meant I was finally scratching at the surface of something dark. As I walked away, a gardener glanced up from the hedge and gave me a quick, sympathetic nod. Small things matter. People see. I pocketed that nod like a coin. I'd need every witness I could find. When I reached my car, an envelope lay on the windshield. No return address. Inside, a single photograph of me taken this morning, walking to my car at the hospital. On the back, in my father's handwriting, one word. Stop. I folded the photo and slipped it into my pocket. He thought a threat would scare me. He didn't know I'd already decided to fight. Grandpa Walter had always kept a little room tucked behind the kitchen where he soldered radios and stacked yellowing National Geographics. It smelled like lemon oil and old paper, the kind of comforting scent that stitched me back to childhood. When I went through his study that night, I told myself I was looking for nothing more than a sweater or a misplaced reading glass. Instead, I found a map. The floorboard by his desk had been pried up before. Walter liked hiding things in plain sight, but tonight the plank came away easier than I expected. Underneath, wrapped in a faded handkerchief, was a slim metal box. My fingers trembled as I lifted it out. Inside, receipts, canceled checks, wire transfer confirmations, and a stack of neat ledger pages in Walter's careful script. At the top of one page, in block letters that made my throat close, was a company name I knew too well, Bayshore Holdings. My father's firm. I spread the papers across the desk. There it was, in black and white. Transactions routed from Walter's small accounts, dated over a decade, payments to shell entities, consulting fees that lined up with dates when Gregory Shaw's projects were in trouble. Tiny sums at first, then larger transfers, the numbers blooming into six-figure rescues. Walter had been bailing my father out for years, quietly, without fanfare, without asking for anything in return. Rage is a slow burn when it's mixed with betrayal. I felt foolish for not seeing it sooner. Grandpa used to joke that money should be like toothpaste, used sparingly, essential when needed. Gregory had treated it like fuel for arrogance. He'd used Walter's generosity to prop up deals that would have crumbled without those secret payments. And when Walter finally threatened to expose the paper trail, perhaps to the board, perhaps to me, Gregory had chosen silence by force. I found a small leather-bound notebook too, the edges soft from handling. Walter's handwriting spidery, affectionate, filled its pages. Reminders, recipes, and then a list of dates with terse notes. Wire to Bayshore, $25,000. AUG, 2016. Emergency transfer, $150,000. MAR, 2018. Beneath one entry, a line scrawled like a whisper. He promised it was final. My hands went numb. Everything slotted into place. The thinness of Gregory's smiles, the way he'd never let Walter sit on the company board, the hushed phone calls. This wasn't just family tension. This was leverage. This was the kind of leverage men used to make other men disappear from conversation. I grabbed a USB from my bag and started scanning, photocopying, saving. The lamp hummed steady above me, as if keeping time. Each file I copied felt like a small theft and a large salvation. I made duplicates, hid one in my purse, and slipped the originals back under the board as if nothing had happened. Walter didn't need to know I'd taken them. He was too proud to want help he'd never asked for, and yet I knew I had to act. That night, Walter slept with his hand tucked over his chest, a frail, contented hold. I sat at his bedside after visiting hours and watched the rise and fall of his breathing. He stirred and mumbled something about jazz and lemon cake. When he opened his eyes, I couldn't hold back. "Walter," I said, voice tiny. "Why didn't you tell me?" He turned his head slightly, the hospital light drawing lines across his face. "I wanted to keep peace," he whispered. "Peace costs little when you can afford it." "Not like this," I answered, the words sharp. "Not when it comes with a lock and a garage floor, and 3 days alone." He looked at me, bewildered for a second, then his eyes softened. "You'll do the right thing, Chloe. You always did." I left the room with the USB burning a hole in my bag and a plan that wouldn't let me sleep until it was done. The next morning, the hospital halls smelled of disinfectant and burned coffee. Grandpa was sitting up, his IV dripping slowly, looking smaller somehow, like time itself had folded him in. When he saw me, his face broke into that soft, tired smile that used to make everything better when I was little. "Hey, kiddo," he whispered, voice dry but steady. "You look like you haven't slept." "I found your notes," I said quietly, pulling up a chair. "The ones about Bayshore Holdings, the transfers, the loans, all of it." His eyes flickered, just once, like the briefest flash of lightning. "You shouldn't have gone through my things, Chloe." "Why didn't you tell me?" I leaned closer. "He used you. He took everything and then locked you up like a criminal." Night. Grandpa's hand trembled as he reached for mine. "He wasn't always like this. When your mother died, he lost his compass. I thought I could keep him from sinking." "You were saving him," I said, "and he repaid you with 3 days in a garage." He turned away, tears glinting in the wrinkles near his temple. "Promise me something, sweetheart. Don't go after him. Men like your father, they only understand destruction." I squeezed his hand. "Then maybe it's time someone spoke his language." His fingers tightened weakly around mine. "Chloe, don't. He'll come for you next." I wanted to tell him he was wrong. That truth was protection, that exposure was power. But when I looked into his frightened eyes, I couldn't lie. I just nodded. That afternoon, I left the hospital to grab clothes from home. The Florida air was thick and heavy, storm clouds bruising the skyline. I turned onto my street and stopped. Someone had been there. The front gate was half open, and the newspaper that should have been on my porch was gone. My stomach knotted. Inside, everything looked the same. Almost. A framed photo of Mom and me, usually centered on the console, was turned face down. My pulse kicked up. I checked every room, every window. Nothing missing, no sign of forced entry. But on the kitchen counter sat an envelope, no address, no stamp. I ripped it open. Inside was a single photograph. It was me standing outside the hospital that morning, coffee in hand, looking over my shoulder. Someone had been watching. On the back, in my father's unmistakable, immaculate handwriting, was one word: stop. My breath hitched. The air around me seemed to thicken, my pulse drumming in my ears. I stared at that word until the letters blurred. For a moment, I almost felt fear. Almost. Then I smiled. A small, cold, dangerous smile. He thought a warning would keep me quiet. He still didn't understand. The moment he locked Grandpa in that garage, he taught me exactly how far I was willing to go. I didn't call the police that night. I didn't even tell Grandpa about the photo. If my father wanted me afraid, he'd miscalculated. Fear sharpens me. It always has. Instead, I drove to the downtown precinct the next morning and asked for Detective Morales, the same woman who'd later appear in more headlines than she ever wanted. She looked up from her desk, expression guarded but curious. "Miss Shaw?" she asked. "What can I do for you?" I slid the USB drive across the table. "I have evidence of financial fraud, elder abuse, and a potential attempted murder. The perpetrator is my father." Her brow lifted just slightly. That's a heavy accusation. Do you have proof? I told her everything, how I found Grandpa in the garage, what he'd said, the ledgers, the photo, the warning. Morales didn't interrupt once. She just took notes, her pen scratching like a metronome. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. You understand? She said carefully. This could destroy your father's business and reputation. I'm counting on it. She nodded. Then I'll open a preliminary investigation. But you need to be careful. Powerful men don't fall quietly. I don't intend to fall with him. That night, I returned home to find my father's Mercedes parked at the curb. The porch light illuminated his tailored suit like armor. He was leaning against the railing, sipping from a silver flask, calm as ever. Nice place, he said, glancing around. Hospitals must pay well. I stood in the doorway, blocking his way in. What do you want? He smiled. You've been busy. Detective Morales stopped by the office today. You really think you can play hero? You're out of your depth, Chloe. I found your ledgers, Dad. The fake accounts, the stolen money. You made Grandpa pay for your mistakes. His jaw tightened. You don't know what you're talking about. I know you left an old man to die in a locked garage because he threatened your image. He stepped forward, shadows cutting across his face. You think you're saving him? He's been poisoning this family for years. He stole from me first. That's not what the records say. He slammed his hand against the doorframe, inches from my face. You want a war? Fine. But remember, when I fight, I don't lose. His breath smelled of whiskey and rage. But beneath it, I saw something new in his eyes, panic. Get off my property, I said evenly. He leaned closer, voice low and venomous. You're just like her, your mother, always choosing weakness. That word hit like a match to gasoline. Mom died trying to protect me from you, I said. You call that weakness? For a heartbeat, the mask slipped. I saw guilt, then fury, swallowing it whole. He straightened his cuffs, recovering the corporate composure he wore like a crown. You've made your choice. As he walked away, I called after him. You're right, Dad. I did. He didn't look back. The taillights disappeared into the night, but I could still feel the heat of his threat in the air. When I went inside, I opened my laptop, copied the files onto an encrypted drive, and scheduled an anonymous drop to 3 journalists, business crime specialists, with reputations for exposing corruption. If he wanted to teach lessons, he was about to learn one he'd never forget. The next morning, the headlines began. By sunrise, my father's empire was already bleeding. The emails had gone out at midnight to every major paper and financial outlet in Florida, each containing a neatly packaged dossier of evidence. By morning, headlines screamed across social feeds and news tickers, like wildfire. Bayshore developer under investigation for fraud and elder abuse. I sat on my couch in silence, the hum of my refrigerator the only sound in the room. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the articles, each one quoting a whistleblower close to the family. They had no idea it was me. Within hours, his investors started withdrawing. His partners released statements of deep concern. His publicist went dark. I almost felt sorry for him, almost. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I knew that voice immediately. You think you're clever, Chloe? It was smooth, almost amused. He hadn't called me in years, always preferred summoning me to his office like an employee. Dad, don't dad me. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've ruined my name, your name, everything I've built. You built it on lies, I said quietly. On Grandpa's money, on his silence. He laughed, a sharp, hollow sound. You don't understand power. You think a few journalists can destroy me? I've survived worse. You won't survive the truth. Truth? His tone turned venomous. You want truth? Fine. That old man stole from me first. He tried to take the company. He turned you against me, just like your mother did. You tried to kill him, Dad. Enough. The voice snapped like a whip. If you want to fix this, meet me at the Bayshore office tonight, 8 o'clock. No police, no games. We talk like family, or I'll bury you in lawsuits before sunrise. Then he hung up. For a moment, I just sat there, heart pounding, hands cold. I could almost hear Grandpa's weak voice in my head. Men like your father, they only understand destruction. I picked up the phone and called Detective Morales. He's called me. He wants to meet tonight. Don't go alone, she said immediately. We'll have units nearby. Let him think you came unarmed. When I arrived, the sky was bruised with the last streaks of sunset. His office building stood silent, glass gleaming like a mirror of everything he pretended to be. I walked inside, each footstep echoing on marble floors that smelled faintly of cologne and money. He was waiting in his office, back to me, looking out the window. "Close the door," he said without turning around. "I don't take orders anymore." He turned, then face pale, eyes hollow, the perfect mask cracked at the edges. "You think this is justice? Do you have any idea what you've started?" "I didn't start this," I said. "You did the moment you locked your father in a garage." He slammed his fist onto the desk. "I gave him everything. Without me, he'd still be fixing radios in a shed." "He gave you everything," I snapped. "And when he finally said no, you treated him like a criminal." He pointed a trembling finger at me. "You're just like your mother, soft, foolish." I stepped closer. "You're wrong. Mom was brave. I'm the one who'll finish what she couldn't." Outside, red and blue lights flashed faintly through the blinds. The sirens hadn't sounded yet, but they would. Morales had promised she'd wait for my signal. My father noticed my glance toward the window. "You called them, didn't you?" "I gave you every chance to do the right thing." For the first time in my life, I saw real fear in his eyes. "You have no idea what you've done." "Actually," I said, reaching for my phone, "I know exactly what I've done." I hit send the signal text. A heartbeat later, sirens screamed outside. Gregory Shaw froze, then laughed bitterly as the door burst open and officers poured in. "Gregory Shaw," one of them barked, "you're under arrest for fraud, elder abuse, and attempted homicide." He stared at me, his voice breaking as they cuffed him. "You think this is justice? You'll regret this, Chloe." I met his eyes one last time. I already did for 20 years. They led him past me, his shoes echoing against the polished floor. When the glass doors closed behind them, the silence hit like a wave. I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe for a while. Outside, the night felt cleaner. The air tasted different, like rain after a storm. Justice didn't sound like thunder. It sounded like the quiet click of handcuffs finally closing. The trial came faster than anyone expected. When your crimes make the front page for 3 straight weeks, the system seems eager to prove it still works. The courthouse smelled like dust and air conditioning, the kind of place where people pretend truth is simple. Grandpa insisted on coming even though the doctors warned against it. He sat beside me, thinner than ever, dressed in a pressed gray suit that hung a little loose on his shoulders. His hand shook slightly when he reached for mine. "I need to see him face the world," he whispered. When Gregory Shaw walked in, every camera turned. The man who'd spent decades controlling the narrative couldn't hide from this one. He still wore the same navy suit and silver tie, but the arrogance was gone, replaced by a stiff, haunted composure. He didn't look at us. Not once. The prosecutor laid everything out in calm precision. The photographs of the garage, the medical report showing dehydration and kidney strain, the ledgers, the video of police entering his office. Every detail like a nail in a coffin. When they played my recorded statement, my voice describing how I'd found Grandpa on that hot August evening, Gregory flinched, just once. The defense tried to spin it as a misunderstanding between family members. They called it temporary stress, overreaction. But the jury didn't need convincing. The evidence was too strong, the story too monstrous. When the verdict came, the courtroom was so silent I could hear the air vents hum. Guilty on all counts. Gregory didn't move, not even when the bailiff approached. He looked down at his hands, at the gold wedding band he'd never removed, and said softly, "I built everything for this family. Natur you can ting. We've was if you problemly." Grandpa's voice broke the silence. "No, son, you built it for yourself." It was the first time in years I'd heard him call my father son. The words landed heavy, final. As they led Gregory away, he turned briefly, eyes locking with mine. "You think this is justice?" he said, his voice a low rasp. "You destroyed our name." I stood up, steady, unflinching. "No, Dad, I saved it from you." The judge rapped her gavel, the noise sharp as thunder. Gregory was sentenced to 6 years in prison for fraud and elder abuse, with mandatory psychological evaluation. He didn't react. He just walked, shoulders squared, toward whatever came next. Outside, reporters swarmed like hornets, microphones flashing in the Florida sun. "Miss Shaw, how does it feel to see your father convicted?" I paused, the words catching in my throat. "It feels like breathing," I said, and kept walking. Grandpa and I drove home in silence. The sky was bruised purple, heavy with the promise of rain. He stared out the window, fingers worrying the edge of his seatbelt. "I never wanted this," he murmured. "I just wanted him to be good again." I reached over, resting my hand on his. "You didn't fail him, Grandpa. He failed himself." When we got home, he went straight to the porch. The wind was rising, the first drops of rain beginning to fall. He looked out toward the horizon, eyes glistening. "Do you forgive him?" he asked quietly. I thought about it. About the garage, the ledger, the way fear had ruled our family for years. "Forgiveness isn't the point," I said. "He wanted control. I wanted truth. Only one of us won." He smiled faintly. "Your mother would have been proud." I didn't cry until later, when I was alone. The storm outside grew louder, the kind that shakes windows and scrubs the heat from the air. I opened the window, letting the rain blow in across my face. For the first time in months, I didn't feel afraid. The man who had tried to bury the truth was finally behind bars, and the little girl who used to flinch at his footsteps had walked him there herself. Justice wasn't vengeance, it was peace. And peace, I was learning, could be louder than thunder. 6 months after the trial, life felt strangely quiet. The kind of quiet that used to scare me now felt like a reward. I'd stopped checking the news every morning. The headlines about my father faded, replaced by newer scandals and fresher tragedies. His company was dismantled, assets sold to cover restitution. I didn't attend the hearings. I'd already heard everything I needed to. Grandpa Walter was healing. Slowly, stubbornly. He refused to move into assisted living, insisting the porch light in my house was bright enough to keep the dark away. Every morning, he'd shuffle out with his coffee and hum old Sinatra tunes while the sun climbed over the palms. Sometimes, when I joined him, he'd hand me a cup and say, "You did what had to be done, kiddo. That's never easy." The house no longer smelled of fear. It smelled like coffee and lemon polish, and sometimes, hope. Still, there were nights when I'd wake up gasping from dreams of the garage, the clanging metal, the echo of Grandpa's voice. But instead of panic, I'd feel something different. Gratitude, maybe. Because that sound had woken me up long before I'd opened that door. One afternoon, as I sorted through old boxes, I found a letter tucked inside Grandpa's ledger book. It was addressed to me in his handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Chloe, if you're reading this, it means the truth finally came out. I'm proud of you, but I worry for the cost. Promise me you'll remember, justice is not revenge. It's the choice to stop the hurt, even when it hurts you to do it. Walter." I sat there for a long time, the letter trembling between my fingers. The words hit deeper than I expected. I realized then that all this time, I hadn't been chasing revenge. I'd been chasing freedom. Freedom from the fear that had ruled our home. From the voice that told me to stay quiet. From the man who mistook control for love. A week later, I visited the prison for the first and last time. I didn't go inside. I just stood beyond the fence. The building loomed gray and humming with distance. Through the glass entrance, I caught a glimpse of my father, older, smaller, almost ordinary. He looked up for half a second, eyes meeting mine through 2 panes of glass and a decade of damage. I didn't wave. I didn't forgive. I just nodded a silent acknowledgement that the war was over. Then I turned and walked away. When I got home that evening, Grandpa was on the porch again, watching the sunset. The sky was a slow fire of gold and violet. He smiled when he saw me. "You look lighter," he said. "I think I am," I answered. For the first time in a long time. He patted the seat beside him. "Then sit down and let's listen to the quiet. You've earned it." I sat, leaning against his shoulder. For a while, neither of us spoke. The cicadas buzzed, the air softened, and the world felt steady again. Later that night, I opened my laptop and began typing. The words came easy this time. He locked my grandfather in darkness for 3 days. I spent the rest of my life making sure he never saw daylight again. I saved the document and closed the computer. Outside, the night was still. No sirens, no threats, just peace. For the first time, silence didn't mean fear. It meant victory.